Hi, I'm Paul Santinello. Welcome to this episode of The Upside. We have with us today two vaunted guests in the political world. We have the assistant managing editor of The Republican, Rob Rizzuto, who stiffed us at our last conversation, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. And world-renowned political consultant Tony Gignoli, who's fresh off of a morning session at the Boston Herald Radio and joining us live here in the studio. And thank you guys for coming. I know getting the two of you in the same room at the same time is almost like parting the Red Sea. So I'm glad we got it. It's my favorite show where we get to talk about all things political, because we could probably do this for about 5 hours.
Oh, gosh.
Absolutely.
And I know we've been here longer than these guys will stay in the studio. So first of all, thank you for coming. We're going to talk today a little bit about the municipal races that are coming up. There's going to be some changes in leadership in at least Westfield, minimally, in the mayor's office. And then we'll touch maybe on some of I want to touch a little bit on Charlie Baker and what's gone on since he's been in office. And then maybe, if we have enough time at the end, hit a little bit about the presidential politics, only because Donald Trump's involved, and I think he's making it a heck of a lot more fun than it would be. Yeah. So first I wanted to ask you guys, there's municipal races going on. There's a mayor's race in Springfield. I think there's 5 candidates or 4 or 5 candidates running. There's some city council races that are there's challengers for them. Ward races not large. Holyoke has a mayor's race and city council races. And as I said, in Westfield, the incumbent mayor, Dan Knappich, is running for city council, which was was a little bit of a shock.
More than interesting.
Yeah, him not running for mayor, I understood that was his announcement, but coming back out and running for city council, I think he took a little bit everybody by surprise.
All the adjutant, not as much money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
But that's a little, it's not unprecedented, I mean, because people have done that after they've left office and gone down to another step, but I wasn't expecting that when I saw his announcement.
I was surprised.
Yeah.
That caught me off guard.
Very much so. I really was. I thought he was, done, and certainly we know, from reports in the media that he's been looking for other positions, town manager positions around the state and whatnot. But those haven't worked out, and maybe he's just thinking this is a way to keep a hand in and stay involved and whatnot. Sometimes too, after you've been the chief executive, it's not bad to go to the legislative body, so to speak, and whatnot, and maybe there where you're one of the others, and of course he has to win to make that happen, and you're able to give some payback and some adjunct to some of the councilors that gave you a hard time. Right. My gosh, yeah.
But it's not unusual. I mean, what my first thought was maybe he wanted to see some of the things through that he had been planning in the mayor's office, because there's been a tremendous amount of physical change in Westfield for the better during his tenure, and I know some of that may have preceded him as well, but the working of it. But under his reign, I mean, the city looks absolutely gorgeous from the center out. The bridges are repaired, and I know they're hitting new senior center, things like that. So my first reaction was he just wants to see some things through, perhaps. But I thought it was interesting, and I think it's good for the city of Westfield that your mayor's still going to be involved in some way, because you don't want to lose that knowledge, so to speak, of what's been going on.
Yeah.
I think it's also interesting that there's a cluster of Republicans that he will, because he's a registered Republican, that he will face off against technically in the at-large election. Yeah. I'm sure they're probably not as ecstatic about him running.
I'm guessing not.
But in the city of Springfield, there's a mayor's race, and there's 4 or 5, because I know that one guy, Jeff Donnelly, was running for mayor, but then submitted for city council or something like that.
I think he's still up in the air. There was a question about some of his signatures. They were working to get those certified, but as of right now, there's 5 challengers.
To the mayor's office.
Sarno, So it's a full crowded race.
And some of them have been pretty vocal already, and some of them are just new to the scene, so to speak.
Johnny Ray McKnight is one that's been he's been very vocal. He's taken to the campaign trail. He's used lots of press releases. I mean, you can see it's kind of a first-time campaign, but he's out there and he's active. I'd say at this point he's probably the most active challenger. 4 months ago it was Sal Sarcosta, but he's been relatively quiet in recent months. But the other folks are newcomers, and they all have their message, and we have profiles assigned for each candidate, so we'll be working to figure out just who these folks are and why they want to be involved.
And so do you think, now, I always believe that everybody's beatable. There's no, especially for someone like Dominic Sarno, who's been there for a while. And as we were talking a little bit earlier, if you've been in office long enough, you compile some negatives somewhere, because you've taken some stance somewhere that wasn't popular with people. And there's been maybe some missteps in some of the things he might have said in the paper about some of the murders and things like that have happened. but he also has a good amount of money where none of his challengers, I don't think combined come to a tenth of what he has. So, and I know Dominic knows also know how to campaign, and I'm assuming he's not going to take it lightly. And I would imagine that they don't have, it's best of a long shot, so to speak. Would you agree with that? That, I mean, anything can happen on any given Sunday, right? That's what they say in
course.
football,
Yes,
right? In the
that's
NFL,
right. That's
yeah.
right. On any given Tuesday,
Yeah.
the same thing. You just never know for sure. Yeah.
But I mean, you have to overcome a lot when you're talking about someone. The last report I saw, I think Dominic had 80-something thousand in the bank. And like I said, I don't think the four other challengers combined probably have $8,000 in the bank. And that's a huge thing to overcome. You said Johnny McKnight.
He's been vocal, but you know, at the
Does
same
that give it-
time,
my question was, and I'm sorry, where I was
Yeah.
going was that, does that gain any momentum or traction with people?
you know, it looks like it does on the grassroots level. But what you have to question is there enough time to do enough of that to make up for kind of the same reaction that Mayor Sarno gets when he walks into a room? And he's very good with people. He'll look across the room and he's saying hello to someone and how's your mother doing? And he doesn't forget those faces. He doesn't forget those names. And that personal connection goes a long way with people. So while you have Johnny Ray McKnight, you know, campaigning hard, you know, bless him for the efforts. It could very well make a difference, but you know, it might be the third largest city in New England, but by all terms, it's still a small city.
Yeah.
And Dominic Sarno was pretty popular.
Yep.
So
19
he's
neighborhoods, and you said it well. He can walk into any of the 19. He's got a base there. He's got an organization that is very well oiled, very, very well put together. And you know, sure, when you're in office for a certain amount of time, there's always going to be you're going to pick up some baggage, some weight, some whatever in a political sense and whatnot. But in this particular instance, something that Rob just said strikes me too. I've seen him time and time again walk into room after room. Pine Point, 16 acres, North End, very, very different neighborhoods that we've got in the city of Springfield, and he gets that same reaction. He's become that hands-on guy, that 24/7 guy. He's around. This is it. This is all he does. There's no tennis. There's no golf.
Yeah.
He's you know, vacations, I don't even know when he takes them. You know, and if he does, it's very, very quiet and whatnot. But he's just always around. And you know, Paul, when you mentioned there's been some tough things this year, some of those tough things play in Peoria. You know, I was really intrigued by the day that the X was closed down in the city of Springfield. And your reporting was phenomenal. Spot on. Live to the, and it's happening, you're reporting it and whatnot. You're videographer or photojournalist, I don't know the correct.
Yeah, Michael Gordon, the photographer.
Oh my gosh, unbelievable, between the stills and the video and all that. But he captured something there that I found intriguing. And I've seen this, I've had other people have talked to me about this outside of the city of Springfield, using Sarno as an example on this one. It could be, that could have been a dicey situation. So there's a shutdown of the X. The X is shut down at peak business time, peak hours. School buses are being held up and all that, but it's still dicey because you've got a mayor, and I'll be really frank with this whole thing, who is an Italian-American kind of guy like us, right? He's white, and he shows up, and this is a Black Lives Matter shutdown. Now, reality is, what the shutdown was stunning because they actually closed down the X. And the mayor literally pulls into the intersection, goes to a police car, takes the microphone, and so right away, you know, I've got, wow, that could backfire. But it's how he said it and what he did. But then and telling these people, please, respect your right to be here. And he didn't get into that, I don't know who the heck you are. You're certainly not from Springfield, which turned out to be the case. Most of these folks were not. But can you please just go to the sidewalk? Can you get out of the street? Because you know what? I've got school buses waiting to go home. There's moms and dads wondering where their kids are right now for the last 30 minutes. And then as we all saw, and as you guys got, bang, an ambulance is trying to get through the X.
Yeah.
They can't get through. So the mayor's savvy enough to utilize those issues. And as I say, it plays in Peoria. In the breadbasket of voting Springfield in Ward 7, people looked at it and goes, yeah, okay, go tell them, Don. That's right, I'm angry, go get it, right? But in the African-American community, in the Hispanic Latino community, the same response came back. It was like, yeah, that's what I want. I want to see the guy show up. And he didn't just leave it to the police department and the rest. And I just use it as one example. It was unique, and it was dangerous.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I am amazed with him. He walks the tightrope sometime. I mean, he could, you know, in a time when you don't see a lot of political courage, or when everybody's running for cover all the time, you know? I was surprised. That's one of maybe 8 or 9 examples like that in the last 8 or 9 months. He can be quite risque with his comments and whatnot too. You know, very, very bold on the homeless issue in the city of Springfield and on crime. You know, on crime, you know, he almost reminds me one of the Gignoli a little bit, right? But then there's the lighter stuff, Fiorello LaGuardia. He keeps, if you go into his office on his desk, that's one of the books he's got there, Fiorello LaGuardia, the little flower, New York mayor and whatnot. So I think that's there. They gotta like you to vote for you. They gotta know who you are too. And you brought up the great point. He's got the war chest, as I mentioned. He's got the campaign organization, and the other fellows out there, God bless them. There's no major domo name out there that the average person is going to know.
And let me just say, when I said you accumulate some baggage, he's also done some really good things too. So whether it's the development of Springfield, and whether you're for or against the casino, there is some economic development happening in the city that wasn't happening 4 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever.
That was delicate.
Huge.
That was a big, and I don't think we all have heard that whole story just yet. And that's the kind of thing, if you're Dominic Sarno, you're thinking about doing that. You got to think about doing that in your ads, in your print ads, saying, hey, and how did you attract this major, one of the biggest companies on the planet to the city of Springfield, especially when you look at the competition that the city of Springfield had on that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'd love to hear him tell the inside, the other side, how that all happened on it. And that plays to the folks that are paying the taxes, that are the homeowners who are the most likely to vote, especially if it's not a big rock'em sock'em mayoral that's going to bring people out from all over the place. Yeah.
And then on the city council side, there's no primary this year, correct? I mean, there's not enough candidate to generate a primary.
Yeah.
Is that the first time in a really long time that I can remember?
Well, I think it's it just fell just short. I think 'cause there's like 40 total candidates or something, right?
Yeah. It's
but there's no primary. Yeah.
But that's the first time in a long time there isn't going to be a primary in a city council race, and at large there's not quite double the challengers. That's where it is. I think there's 4 challengers for the 5 at-large seats.
Yeah, that's
and
correct.
all the incumbents are running again.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can, sometimes there's complacency, and sometimes you need the really bad things. And most times it's fiscal issues that drive things, and there's not a fiscal issue right now. I'll take that back. There's always fiscal issues.
Right.
The fiscal situation in the city of Springfield is better than it was 3 or 4 years ago, and there's a surplus versus deficits and control boards and things like that. So you don't necessarily get the pitchforks coming at you. So
it's different.
Maybe that's why there's not as many running.
It almost becomes the neighborhood kind of a battle. I mean, to have all the incumbents running for re-election and to have this many challengers who are out there working it, you've almost got to go neighborhood to neighborhood. You've got to find something to resonate on. And I know I shouldn't mention one candidate or another or whatever, but Jesse Letterman has been intriguing the last couple of months. He's finding quality of life issues that matter in each one of the neighborhoods,
Yeah.
The parks, he's got 5 neighborhoods saying, what he said, from Mason Square to Indian Orchard, and he's getting, notoriety on it. He's using his social media well.
Absolutely.
It's being, fairly reported too. It's not like, hey, look what Letterman did, but just by chance, he's the guy that launched this petition to get, the Naismith Memorial addressed, the plastic park issue in Indian Orchard. I mean, Indian Orchard, if you're out there in Indian Orchard, you're saying, you know what, I'm a little angry. I've got no pool, I've got no parks, I've got, and it's not just a city situation. The Commonwealth, I think it's going on 7 years now, has had Lake Lorraine closed.
Yeah.
And you know what? This is one of those hardworking, blue-collar neighborhoods. The Indian Orchard Citizens Council is a major domo politically, and these are folks that feel kind of alienated, right?
Yeah.
They got their own Main Street. It's separate. They were the hamlet of Springfield at one time. And in a council race, that can be interesting. I think that there's opportunity for those who are running at large to get a vote out of that area. There's no race for the district councilor there. Rolando Ramos is running alone now, so he's reelected. But what's intriguing to me, when I see the mayor go out there, as tough as Indian Orchard feels about, hey, we're out here, and everybody forgets about us, he does well when he's out there, the mayor.
Yeah.
So, but here's these issues they've got. And you know what I always love? In an election like this, that's what's cool. This is the time for the electorate to make a noise. You're angry about something, now's the time. As a matter of fact, Indian Orchard's got the first mayoral debate, or the first city council debate.
Yeah.
They're moving for it. They've already, first mayoral, forgive me, Rob.
Yep, that's
where
right.
they've already invited all the candidates to say, we don't know exactly when, but we want you all out here in the
We
Orchard.
put it on the table.
Yeah, you guys reported that.
Well, you talk about neighborhood issues. Look at the North End right now.
Bang. Wow.
It's as kind of loud as you're hearing anything in the city relating to
Hundreds
the
of people
relocation
showing
of
up.
the Western Massachusetts Correctional Alcohol Facility, which is run by the Sheriff's Department. I don't think the sheriff or anybody was expecting kind of the backlash that they've had. and that's become a major neighborhood issue.
Yeah.
And I expect that to rear its head in some way, shape, or form. The mayor's already come out in support, saying, I support Sheriff Ash. Look in the South End, I had the same concerns. He was a good neighbor. He's put himself out there, but will any of his opponents use that same issue to capitalize? It would make sense if they did.
Intriguing. I've got a lot of friends that live in that neighborhood still and have been there, some of them for 20 and 30 years, and even newer folks that have been there. And their argument is not just, hey, this particular issue, it's always on us. It's always here. Anything that's going to get cited, to this clinic, to that clinic, to this, it's all here, all the social service stuff. And it's intriguing. If you go up and down a couple of those streets, and actually, let me say it this way, if you got dropped off in that part of the North End, and you're blindfolded on the way in, and just walk around the streets, and then do the same thing. You could, in 16 acres, the neighborhoods are so similar. It's just really cool. There's a lot of folks there that own their own homes, and I don't think this is almost just so much an issue about this particular piece. It's just in general. This is the moment. This is the time to say, hey, what are we going to get out of this? And that could be the unique thing too. I know that right now it might look like the sheriff's on the ropes a little bit with this one, but I think as he starts to better explain or get out there to explain, here's what this is. Here's what our experience was in the South End. You can always point to Pine Point too. Remember when he took over the Armory in Pine Point? I mean, by force, took over the Armory. Amazing, using an obscure law from the 1700s. And long story short, it was because of the overcrowding at the York Street Jail. In Pine Point, that's another tough neighborhood. I grew up there. You would have thought that neighborhood would have flipped. They gave him a day or two. They listened to what he had to say. When the Hampden County Sheriff's Department went to leave the Armory because they had a new facility in Ludlow, I mean, literally, you saw the petition start. They wanted him to stay. The neighborhood had never been cleaner. The neighborhood had never been safer, having those cars on. I think if he can just get out there with that.
Tell the story.
He's got to tell the story. And I think, Rob, forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think it came up so quickly. I think it was kind of like, whoa, wait, this is us out of the blue.
Yeah.
That people didn't have a chance to vet or listen in. I think if there's more of a public vetting, as he does well, and he's done it for 42 years now, he's just got to tell, here's the story. Here, and forgive me for making it this blunt, here's what's in it for the neighborhood. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to be safer. I'm going to take care of graffiti issues. I'm going to have my cleanup crews out there. Here's what I'm going to do for the North End, like I did in the South End, like I did in Pine Point, like I'm doing in Holyoke. So forgive me for going long, and I just love that particular issue.
But to your point, I don't think he was expecting the reaction. I don't think anybody was, the reaction that he got originally. And
I was surprised.
Yeah.
So, and when you're looking at city council races, do you think that when you look at the at-larges, maybe is it 9 candidates for 5 spots, all 5 incumbents are running, and then you have races in the neighborhoods, the ward precincts. Is it harder to fight and win a ward seat or an at-large seat?
You want to go first?
Geez, well,
so many thoughts on that. Yeah.
I think it'd probably vary based on the neighborhood. Some neighborhoods probably not so hard to win, and others it's probably...
You mean, I'm trying to take out an incumbent, because obviously they have to take out an incumbent because they're all running.
I mean, just one ward race to bring up right now is it's the Ward 3 race. Melvin Edwards, longtime city councilor, and now he is bring it back in the story. 2012 charity football game that was at the Dunbar Center, or charity basketball game.
Right.
Reverend Talbert Swan challenged Scott Brown. Then the senator running against Elizabeth Warren. It's like the old days. I'm thinking about it. To this charity basketball game, and all the local politicians got involved. Melvin Edwards was hurt really bad before the game even started. Blew out both knees. He still has medical issues to this day. And just this week, a few days shy of like the 3-year mark, he filed a civil suit, and that's become kind of a political football. What we've seen today is Yolanda Cancel, who is his competition, community activist, not as big of a name as Melvin Edwards, who had run for a statewide seat just last year. She actually took that on. And it's, if you look at kind of some of the public backlash against Mr. Edwards for the civil suit against Dunbar, which has its own financial problems, if she could capitalize on that, there's a chance that she could capture that seat that he's held for I forget it, maybe
This
9
will be
years.
his third term
Yeah, third
overall.
term.
Yeah,
So he's
yeah.
been in there for some time.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's
That's what it all comes down to too. What issues are erupting at what time? That's a great example. You know, that, and this is a big deal. The Dunbar in that community is a big deal. I mean, you know, there's so many people. You know, geez, my grandkids, my kids, my grandfather, everybody went through this place and whatnot. Big Will, you know, was a known name from the Dun. You know, Big Will and all that. Right?
Big Will's
you know,
Express,
and exactly.
Duke Belton,
Thank you,
yeah.
Duke Belton, the boxing program, the rest. You know, a lot of people would argue strongly that the Dunbar helped them, you know, in their life. Maybe help them not to get in trouble. You know, if you got in trouble and Duke Belton knocked on your door or Big Well, you were terrified. You didn't worry about your parents. You worried about those guys. You know, I mean, they'd even show up in Pine Point sometimes to let you know what was
They kept a
shaking.
lot of kids off the street.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But you know, a lot of it depends on what community you're in, what city. You know, in Boston, a ward fight is as big as a as a state rep race. You know,
Right.
but I think that in Springfield, it really depends on which ward you're talking about. And at large is going to be the interesting right now because,
Yeah.
as you said earlier, all the at-large councilors are running for
But do you
re-election.
find is it taking on a ward rep versus at large is it more personal because it's usually one-on-one versus at
It is a lot.
large?
Yeah, it's a door-to-door fight. Yeah, it's a street fight.
Because you're not at large. You got the whole city to cover, you might not see each other crossing paths.
Yeah.
But you're in a ward and you're knocking on doors. You're going to bump into your opponent,
I think
and
it's
a lot more
Right.
personal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's what I mean. I mean, what I differentiate is that if I'm running against you in a ward seat, I got to come after you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
One way or the other. I can go at large. I don't
Yeah.
have to say anything personal about you.
no, it can
Yeah.
only be
I
about
can do-
yourself.
right.
Yeah.
More name recognition, latch onto the issues that matter, and then
Right.
Jesse Litterman.
Right.
Yes.
He's
He's
not,
not-
right.
Yeah.
He's not trashing different, folks.
yeah.
He's all over the place
Yeah.
though, and I can tell you that just from what I've seen, aside from my role in the news, he's everywhere.
Yeah.
I go out to dinner and he's there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I go for a walk in the
Stalking,
morning and I said it could be.
Get the sheriff on the line for you. That's
But that visibility,
Yeah.
I really believe it makes a difference, especially in a local race.
Absolutely.
And this brings me back to
But it gets to what you said, Tony, which is they got to like you.
Yeah.
And
They
if
gotta
they
know
see
you to like you.
and
They gotta
if
like
they
you
see
to
you
vote for you.
working, that's the
Yeah.
first step, right?
Yeah.
Is that, you're
Yeah.
not going to hide behind some political ads that are
Yeah.
2 years old.
Yeah.
That you
Yeah.
just you replayed them and stuff. And,
Exactly.
But he's out there. He's getting his name. He's getting a message out. Quality of life, and that's the first thing that I saw when he started hitting on the playground equipment.
Yeah.
Okay, and they showed it something. First of all, that's unacceptable in any municipality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was a playground for
Yeah.
kids. It wasn't an
Yeah.
adult basketball court or something like
Yeah,
that.
the slide issue
Yeah.
there
Yeah,
in
the hole in the
Van
slide.
Horners.
Yeah, and so when
Yeah.
you look at it, and like you said, every parent who's gone there with a kid, and it was roped off or sectioned off so kids couldn't go on.
Yeah.
But if you're there with a kid, even if you're not playing on that piece of equipment, it is a quality of life,
And they're mine.
personal issue.
This is the guy that
Right.
helped get that done. And made an issue out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
So if
Yeah.
a few of those people paid attention and they talked to their friends and they talked to their friends
Yeah.
with kids, if a percentage of enough of them vote,
Yeah.
he's moving right up that at-large
And he
list.
gets to be
he's
known
in
as the
office.
guy who, if
Yeah.
you got a problem in your park, call him.
Right.
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
only a candidate, not a counselor.
And when you say quality of life, I always think of a former city councilor, Bill Foley. That was always his big thing. What are the quality of life issues? And Bill would not run expensive campaigns or high-profile campaigns, but he'd be out there all year long on these issues. And like Rob said, people would remember that. He was here when there was that problem with the stop sign, or there was that problem with the school or whatever, or there's a crime issue. Bill Foley would show up in person, and the word would get around. And he'd run on that every year, every 2 years. It's about quality of life in the city of Springfield. So I think that can play a lot. What affects real people, their children, what affects their pocketbook, what they know about, what they can feel, real
Right.
issues. The loftier stuff, the budget, it kind of goes over their head a little bit sometimes.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's some things that when it hits
Yeah.
your heart,
Yeah.
it's a bigger payoff than, or bigger incentive than
Yeah.
it is what's going on tax-wise right now. And like I said, there's not fiscal issues. There's just not a fiscal nightmare in
Exactly.
the city of Springfield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you look at Holyoke, there's a mayor's race and there's also council races that are going on. There's some unique council races that you guys have reported on.
Yes, there are.
Even where opponents are going at it, where they're not running against each other.
Holy
Yeah.
smokes.
But in the mayor's race, there's two opponents, aren't there, for that?
Yeah, Anthony Soto is a
city
city
councilor,
councilor
yeah.
and local businessman, Fran O'Connell.
Yes, yeah.
And what are your thoughts on that race? Because I know that, because to me, the biggest issue in Holyoke is the takeover of the schools by the state. And a lot of times, because there is a school committee and the mayor's on the school committee, but that's more of a titular head than anything else. I don't know if that's the biggest issue going on in the city, but it seems like it is a big issue, period, when your schools are taken over, regardless of what the where it is.
I mean, I'd say absolutely a huge issue. I think from Alex Morse's stance, you know, he's an incumbent. Is he popular? Yes. But is he vulnerable? I think certainly. You know, how are all the issues and things that are happening in Holyoke, from you know, crime to the school situation, how are these resonating with the residents? And do they assign blame? And if they do, is it falling on his shoulders? Are they looking at all these things? The Heather Egan thing, the former city solicitor. There's the fact that the questions lingered around this for so long. I mean, granted, it was a $55,000 payment, I believe. I apologize if I'm incorrect with the number there.
You're on target.
But for you know, for her departure, it's basically a buyout. You know, just the fact that that turned into such a thing. Do people care? Is it going to resonate? For me, as I'm looking from the outside looking in, that's the question. At the same time, is you know, Mr. Soto or Mr. O'Connell going to run the kind of campaign that can really dethrone Alex Morse?
Right.
Morse has an organization, obviously well-oiled, strong. It's evolved a bit. It's not all the same players as in the beginning, but he knows the nuances of the new age of campaign. He understands the social media, data mining, voter ID, get out to vote. Anthony Soto will work it hard. He'll be a door-to-door kind of a guy, but it comes down to dollars. Will he have the kind of money to be able to compete in those arenas that I just mentioned? And then Fran O'Connell is interesting, because I think he's the, well, guess what I'm looking for? He's the unique player in this particular one. And questions come up there right off the bat in how he announced. You know, initially he said, I'm running, but I really don't care if I win or not. And then he changed it around. It's interesting to watch Mike plays on. You know, Mike could just do a whole book about Holyoke politics at this point. In the time that he's been covering Holyoke from beginning to end, just on his watch, you know? And it's intriguing to me, because now you've got a business person who clearly is successful, as we all know, and who also has got a presence in that you can't go down 91 or just about anywhere around Holyoke and not see his billboards. And it's intriguing how those billboards have changed with the one word, dignity. You know, it's intriguing. Where does the advertising campaign for O'Connell Home Care, if I'm saying it correct, or Care at Home, differentiate from the campaign? Can that help him? You know, he certainly, I don't think he's a Donald Trump kind of a guy, but there's a business person's aspect of this. And what will his argument be in these next few weeks before this primary? I mean, this primary is like next week, you know? And so in that regard, it intrigues me too, because we just kind of watch everything. We're not involved in Holyoke, but we watch everybody's social media. I saw Alex Morris's this morning, and he's reading to a group of children and whatnot. And I saw Fran O'Connell's last night. It's a photo of Fran in Puerto Rico. I spend a lot of time in Puerto Rico. I'm ready to come home now and campaign. Fran, this election's like next week, you know what I'm saying? So the average person sees that and says, I can't take off to Puerto Rico for a month or 5 weeks. So he'll have to do kind of what Rob talked about with a few other candidates. Make it clear to the people in Holyoke, here's what I'm going to be able to do as your mayor, to address the issues that are on your mind, and to offer some kind of a change. This one's jump ball for this primary, I think. You're right, anybody's vulnerable anytime, and the mayor certainly over the course of time has taken on some hits. But this would be a primary that I wouldn't be able to even take a guess as to who finishes first in the primary. You know, you can pretty much tell if it's one or two of them, of the three that get through the primary, how it'll end up in the general. But the primary is interesting, and I think this is going to be if a guy like O'Connell or Soto can really pour it on and do well, they make it a significant challenge in the general. Yeah.
And then Holyoke also has 4 ballot questions that'll come on in November.
Good for you, Paul. Yeah.
Right. And do you think, because one of them is about, you know, the treasurer situation, about where the treasurer was taking another job, and now they want to make, there's a ballot question to make it an elected position versus appointed, or the other way around.
The other way around. They want to
appointed versus elected, to put the mayor's term at 4 years, city council at 4 years, and then there's a 4th one out there that I can't recall. But those, to me, would seem to be a driver in November, not for the primary, obviously, but in November to be a driver in the race one way or the other. Because now you're talking about, I think it was a pay raise too, maybe, that they were looking at for the mayor council in there. Maybe.
I think that could be. I know that the term limit changes. That's like
well, it was term limit changes for the city council and the mayor. That was the fourth question. Right? The 4th question was for the city council to expand them to 4-year terms. Yeah. And I think that would drive people out, because that's one of those issues that
definitely. Do you want that or not?
Right. Whether you were for it or against it, it's going to tick you off, you know, or you're going to like it.
You're probably going to have an opinion, and if you think Alex Morse has done a great job, you might be more inclined to go out and vote so you can extend his term limit and vote for him at the same time.
Yeah.
Right.
But at the same time, you get that, well, I like him enough, people will vote for him. Maybe it won't turn out that way. I think that can definitely drive people, but how will it end? What do you think versus the negative driving people out versus a positive?
I think Morse is smart enough to know he has to go and make his case, and he can make a case. Here's what I've done. Yeah, there's been a lot of rock'em sock'em stuff, the Heather Egan issue, the rest. But when you mention the Heather Egan issue and you mention the school issue, so these issues were out there, extremely well covered. Mike Plaisance' 7-part series, if I'm recalling it, on Heather Egan, on top of all the other coverage, right? And I don't live in Holyoke, so I certainly can't say from a Holyoke perspective, but I've got so many friends that are there, and we're in and out on so many different issues. There was no hue and cry. Even on the school issue, there was a lot of noise, but there was no one saying, oh my God. Right. And what was starting to happen too, I haven't seen a poll, but there almost seems to be a feeling of, good thing, the states come in, great, let them take over now, let's get this addressed, let's get this, And especially in the Hispanic Latino community, what I heard from a lot of folks was, I want a better education for my kids, and it's not working this way. So almost like the definition of insanity, if we keep doing the same thing, we're not going to get don't expect a different answer or a different outcome. So I don't know, Paul, those should be gigantic issues, but again, I'm not there in Holyoke, but I'm not seeing the hit. I'm not seeing the residents, or at least people saying, that's the mayor's fault. Even on the Heather Egan thing, which clearly is the mayor and Heather Egan, it's like, does it matter to the average person? And when you look at the voting blocks of Holyoke, is it resonating in those Holyoke voting blocks? I don't
that's
think
up
so.
to the guys,
the
people who are running. To point it out that it's the mayor's fault.
There you go.
Or not the
Paul,
right
thank you. That's exactly it. Yeah, because the Fourth Estate's done the job.
Right.
The media's covered, and everyone else in the media too. They've put it all out there for everybody to see. But you're right. It's the candidates who have got to say, here's why this is important to you. And why you should or should not return Alex Morse.
Yeah. And what's fascinating is that someone would put your name, and I give people for putting their name out there and running for an office.
Yeah.
Whether it's, especially if you're a businessman in town like Fran O'Connor or Soto on the school, you're already on the city council. They know you, right? And he seemed very personable people. They're very good people persons. But the issue of maybe they're holding all their money till after Labor Day, but I doubt it. But I haven't seen, even in Springfield, there's no primary, but the race is in November, and if you're going to start in September, you've got 7-8 weeks, and your message has to be. And if you don't have 40,000, 50,000 advertised, you're done.
Yeah, these races are on now. Anybody that's not out there actively campaigning, and I know we've mentioned Jesse Letterman because he's just a great example. This guy's been working it like a dog since February or January.
Absolutely.
And there are others too doing it.
Yeah.
Like I tell you, I talk about an incumbent who works it. Cateri Walsh. She's got to be a twin or a triplet. She's everywhere all the time and runs as if it's her first time, runs as if she's in trouble all the time. People look at that, and John F. Kennedy had a great line to that. You can judge the kind of public servant a candidate is going to be by the campaign they run. If they're not going to fight for themselves, what you just said, if they're not going to get out there and do it for themselves, they're not going to do it for you. They're not going to be out there doing it for you. And those are some examples of those folks you're always seeing around, always working it.
Yeah. And then, like I said, up in Westfield, there doesn't seem to be. There is a mayoral race, and then there's some at-large city council races, and again, everything seems super quiet.
Yeah.
Even in the mayor's race, and I know it's an open seat, and you have the former mayor's brother running.
Yes, who's been city council president for a long, long time. Westfield. It's almost.
I think you have to be within the Canapic.
That's where I was going to go.
It's one of the others.
There's a box to check on your application.
It's like Clinton Bush. It's that kind of thing. It's one of these two. And by chance, the Canapics are Republicans and the Sullivans are Democratic. And Brian Sullivan has served on the school committee and as city council president for a haul of time. And he's got name recognition, and of course his brother was mayor. And so he's there. I think West Springfield is the one that's intriguing right now.
Yeah.
Because that world changed overnight this week.
And I forgot to say that, but yes.
Well, it's amazing. You've got Ed Sullivan, who beat Greg Neffinger. Neffinger comes in for one term. Sullivan comes in and takes him out, stays a term, and then decides, I've got to go back to the family business.
Yeah.
Well-liked guy can make a case that here's what I said I was going to do, and I actually addressed a lot of this stuff. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't, with a lot of glitz and glitter, but here's what we got done. Now his city solicitor, and I don't know if I'm going to say his name correctly, Will Reichelt, is running. for the seat, young fella. You've got State Representative Michael Finn, running. And Greg Neffinger has made the return. There were others that were in. They're all out now. And it's just these three heavyweights getting, to go at it and whatnot. Finn, name recognition. Reichelt, maybe the association, having been in Sullivan's administration, is a good thing. But watching this team work. Reichelt's been out there for weeks doing the pounding of the door. The lawn sign war is on, and it looks like it's Finn versus Reichelt there. But all of a sudden, the last week, Neffinger, all of a sudden, showing up all over the place. That's a jump ball, that particular. And I guess what makes it difficult, they really didn't start to really, and this wasn't formalized until this past week, the June 28th deadline, and now they've got a new problem. If they were strategizing, thinking they were going to September 15th, the city changes everything overnight. Hey, September 15th, Rosh Hashanah, we're not doing it that day. We're going to take a week off the election. So they're all, you talked about Labor Day.
Right.
There's like no time between Labor Day. If they're waiting to go to Labor Day to get started, anybody.
They're done.
Yeah, it's the next Tuesday is the election. So holy smokes, I've not seen in the longest time. I have seen election dates or referendums dates moved for religious holidays like Rosh Hashanah, but I've never seen it done this late. You think somebody would have thought of that last January?
Or pushed it back, not forward.
Exactly, or an extra week.
Right. But then you got the Big E, and you can't. That's almost like a religious holiday too.
It is. Yeah.
Especially for West Springfield.
Yeah, it's good. It's a street fight over there. This one's going to be Rock'em Sock'em, and those debates will be interesting based on how interesting Neffinger and Sullivan were in the past.
So, is there enough time between Neffinger's tenure to the end of Sullivan's to make people say, gee, we missed them and we need it? Because there were some good things that were there. I mean, he talked about cutting property taxes, and in fact, I think he did one year, or lowering property taxes, I should say. And for a community that has one of the highest commercial property rates in the Commonwealth, if not the highest. But I mean, when you get there and you have someone like that was in office, and there's some missteps along the way, maybe more than a few, but and then you have Sullivan come in, who was a really quiet guy. I mean, you almost didn't know he was. No offense, but you almost didn't know he was there because
he was a worker guy.
That's his personality. He's just a quiet guy who gets the job done, like you said. But so is there enough for, and Finn, like you said, popular guy, was on the city council before that, so he knows the ropes and stuff.
That's right, I forgot that.
So, and him and I know him and Neffinger had battles, along the way when he was running for mayor. So is there enough time in between those 2 years to say, gee, he did some good in office, can we come back from that? Because I'm intrigued by the fact, and I'm glad to see that he got in, because, if you were there 2 years ago, you had enough votes, or 4 years ago when you won. But it does add a different dynamic to the race where you had, because he's the opposite of, I'm sure, of Finn on a lot of issues.
And if I remember right, when Neffinger lost, it wasn't by a small margin.
No.
I can't remember what the number was, but didn't Sullivan pretty much
He did. It was a significant victory for Sullivan over Neffinger. But there too, Neffinger.
That's what I'm saying. Is there enough time in between that?
Has enough time gone by?
You don't remember that it was a clock cleaning versus, hey, we missed the guy who cut our property taxes or something.
I'd have to say no. I mean, you don't know, but I'd argue no.
I think that's what perhaps Neffinger missed in his re-election. He never made that. I am the guy that cut the taxes, and here's how I did it. So many other issues came up. He was fighting battles all over the place and whatnot. And they were battles that the average person didn't care that much about. Let's go spend $400K to go buy the old church and paint it up and all. Really? Wait a second. You just saved me this money over here. These weren't firebrand type issues. So as enough time gone by, you never know. It depends on what he's got to spend, I think, and what perception he can create of his 2 years as mayor.
The story he's going to tell.
Yeah, what's the story? What's the story, and what is the electorate going to hear and buy into? Yeah. But I think that's going to be the Rock'em Sock'em. Those three, that's going to be an intriguing primary over there.
It'll be a good race.
Yeah. Okay. Any other race you want to opine on? So you're the only one who didn't need work to come. You got Cliff Notes.
He did his homework.
If I was going to mention one other city council race in the city of Springfield, it would have to be Ward 6. It's where I live. Ken Shea, he's been in there for quite some time. He has, I'd say, significant competition in Kim Rivera. Kim is a behind-the-scenes Democratic organizer. She's a kind of community activist. Kim knows how to turn the vote out. She was at the forefront of lots of the Springfield efforts for Elizabeth Warren. In my time reporting politics here, I've seen Kim Rivera just about anywhere when there's even a semi-major Democratic election going on. And she knows how to motivate people and to turn out the vote. can she do it in her own favor? You know what I mean? That's always the, I guess
There's
the
a difference
question.
between doing it for someone else and
Yes.
yourself, right?
Yeah,
Your name's out
yeah.
there,
Some people are fantastic at working hard for somebody else, but when it comes to selling themselves, they might have a hard time with it, for whatever reason. But I know that, that race I haven't heard much recently, but it wasn't 6 months ago, maybe it was the end of 2014, there was a murder or a significant shooting in her neighborhood, in her part of Lower Forest Park, and the person basically collapsed. She comes home from like a community meeting, and there's a body in her yard, and that pretty much, she had a conversation with our crime reporter Connor Berry, who was on the scene, and it was a very strong moment, and if she can crystallize on those type of things, it has the potential to sway things. But Ken's a very strong incumbent. He's very well liked in the district and neighborhood. But that's one that I have my eye on because I know who Kim Rivera is.
Yeah. And
She knows how to do it. That's the piece. And that piece with Connor Berry, great reporter, catching the moment, but at the same time, she uniquely, I mean, that was something that you read all over the city to see what her thoughts and her ideas were, or what her feelings were, her raw emotion that came out that he captured there and whatnot. And that seems to be the issue overall in every neighborhood in Springfield, whether you are happy with the way things are going or not. The overriding issue always is crime and concern, and it's a quality of life, public safety issue that's there. So that will be one that I think you'll see the two of them really have to go at to win re-election or to win election in Forest Park. And it's such a different neighborhood now too. It's a neighborhood that's saying, listen, this used to be one of the breadbaskets of the city of Springfield. It still is, but it's changed so much now too. It's not Forest Park of 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. And Ken Shea, by right too, has been around for a while. School committee for a long time. A lot of issues on the school committee for Ken Shea that were the tough ones. I mean, and people probably 50 and over remember him from that, and the things that he did on the school committee and then on council and whatnot. So they both have resumes I think they can bring to this. And Kim, not just as a political activist, but as you just mentioned, here's a woman that's coming home from a community meeting and finds a body in her front yard. She's always out there. So both of them I think will bring unique armies. But yeah, that is a good, cool one to watch. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about Governor Baker. He's been in office now for 7 months, roughly. Scorecards have come out here and there on him and so forth, and his administration, the work they're doing. Your thoughts?
Well, I think
because you've been covering him pretty well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, we've been doing our best. I think that he's. I mean, let's face it. He really inherited kind of a tough financial situation, and I think that impacted a lot of the things he wanted to get done in the first 6 months. He had a very strong plan to add, treatment beds to kind of fight the opioid addiction crisis. He had to kind of scale that back. I think he's pushed a lot of the priorities the best that he could with kind of the financial situation that we're in as a state. And from my conversations with people, Republican, Democrat, Independent, people seem to be pretty pleased with where things are. They see him trying, they don't see him butting heads in a vindictive kind of way, in a political kind of way, where there's disagreements between the legislature, which is obviously largely Democratic, and him. People have kind of, it's not looking like a partisan issue. I know we're just getting, to the, into the whole budget fight and everything, so that could change in any time.
I'll give him 6 months when he's creating his own budget. We'll see how nice it is, but for now, you're right.
I think he seems to be very well received, and although he's had to cut back on some of the things he wanted to do, it looks like a great majority of them are still moving forward, even if not at the pace, perhaps, that he would have liked to have seen ideally.
Yeah, I think it's the A for effort, and you're right. He inherited a lot of headaches right off the bat, DCF, and even still today, this past week, what we're reading about DCF. Horrific, just absolutely horrific. And plenty of reasons, and not to get into all that and whatnot, but I think, here's a fellow who inherited a horror story at the MBTA that came up that had to be dealt with right off the bat. You cannot have Boston shut down, the economic center of the Commonwealth. It can't happen, and that was happening. And it was unique to watch how he dealt with that. He was very clear. He set up the expectations right off the bat. I'm the governor, and I don't control the MBTA. I didn't put those commissioners there. They're not mine. I can't fire them. I cannot fire her, the director. I'd like to, but I can't. And then he started to use the bully pulpit. And then he found a unique collaborator, the new mayor of Boston, saying the same things. And the two of them got together and they used the bully pulpit. Out goes the director, changes start to get made. We saw it with Snowmageddon. The two of them worked together, unique, very, very unique, the two of them in that regard. So even to that effect, Stanley Rosenberg, powerful Senate president, liberal, progressive kind of a guy from Western Mass, yet working with Baker. They just had their first little bit of a dust-up, and it wasn't really a dust-up the way that we're usually familiar with between a Senate president or a leader from one party and a governor from the other party. They had a disagreement on the budget. Stanley comes back with numbers and says, you know, you're wrong. And they go back and forth, back and forth. The Senate and the House restore a lot of Baker's cuts. Baker's kind of okay with it because, yeah, I see what you're saying, Stan. Yeah, the money was over here. I didn't see it. All right, and so they negotiate. There's a more collegial atmosphere with Baker. And I'll be honest, I don't really totally understand it. He doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that's go out and have a pizza and have a beer, you know? But he and Rosenberg, and he and DeLeo, and Rosenberg and DeLeo, the three of them are working together pretty well right now.
I can't see that. 5 minutes? There you go. Thank you. It's a little dark in here.
Yeah.
But the other thing that was interesting was his position on the Olympics.
Yeah.
Or not lack of position, but position, where the stance that he took. And I was even surprised by the mayor of Boston's decision as well, because I figured there was going to be enough buttons pushed to where he would sign off on it. And I think both of them came out of that looking pretty good as well. Because they didn't want the state to be in harm's way.
Yeah, I think that the thought was all along that, because that was, if anything's political, that was the Olympic push. Absolutely. Sure. I mean, if you look at the names behind it, it doesn't get any more political than that. Yeah. And I think there was a thought for a long time, this is just going to be pushed through and they're just going to let this happen. This is the way things work. And people thought they weren't going to have a say. Even folks that weren't necessarily opposed to the Olympics, they were just concerned, they had questions. And the fact that Baker said, you know what, I like the idea, I think it'd be fantastic, but I have way too many questions to sign on. And then obviously Boston Mayor Marty Walsh, when he says, as it stands right now, I refuse to endorse it. It was the nail in the coffin, that was it. Yeah. And I think that kind of, saw a wave across the state of, kind of that hitting. And I think it was pretty huge.
Yeah, and there the group that the gas tax group was already forming for Tank the Olympics.
Right, and they coupled with Evan Falchuk.
With Evan Falchuk.
One of the big winners, obviously, Evan Falchuk. And maybe one of the other big winners, too, was Tito Jackson, the city councilor, who basically just said, listen, it's not that I'm for it or against it. I want to know what my constituents have to pay. Yeah. And he asked and asked and asked, and they kept promising. Former Secretary Davies, the head of the 2024 piece, we're going to get it to you, we're going to get it to you. And finally, Tito said, you're not getting it to me. And let me tell you something. I might just be a district city councilor in Boston, right? But let me tell you, we have subpoena powers. And they went to subpoena the documents. They still never got them. But somehow they did come out at the end. And when you actually saw it was there, absolutely. The city of Commonwealth of Massachusetts on the hook for the tab on this thing is what it came down to. And then the other piece that really broke the mayor's heart was when the mayor had a chance to finally see these documents and say, hey, wait a second, you guys lied. You told the United States Olympic Committee that you were going to fight a referendum if this went to referendum. Publicly, you said you're with Evan Falchuk. Let the people decide. You lied. It's right here in the document. Wait a second. What's going on here? Too cute. The whole piece was just.
I was intrigued by the uniting of Evan Falchuk and Jeff Deal.
Yeah.
And reaching across there and saying two guys coming together opposite sides of, and now Jeff Deal's running for state senate in a special election, but I don't think one had to do with the other at the time that they got together.
That's right.
And I thought, there you go, another grassroots event, event that was going to come up, and I would love to see the Olympics in Boston, just not us paying. And for everybody out here who goes up and down Route 91, you can tell why the money should be coming out this way versus going in Boston. But we have a couple of minutes left. What I wanted to go to is the presidential debate that's coming up, and whatever. Thank God Donald Trump's involved, because otherwise it would be 10 people up there talking and no one would be listening. At least they're going to be tuning in Thursday night. This is a Wednesday before the taping, and we had a nice family argument last night about Donald Trump being in the race and why he's resonating with people. And for a guy who most people can't identify with, who flies around to the golf tournament in Scotland in his private jet and private helicopter, he's picking up a lot of grassroots support, and it's very, very different. It's not rich white guy supporting the rich white guy. I mean, that's what do you think?
I think it's been very interesting to see. I think, just by him being out there, and even if people don't agree with him, which I think a lot of the people that I see sharing his things on Facebook don't necessarily, it's like the Chris Christie effect. When somebody tells you, they say something kind of forcefully, and it's a little bit out there, but they look like they mean it. It resonates with people. Yeah. And plus, I think with Trump, you got the whole kind of Hollywood factor where it seems cool.
Yeah.
I think that's a piece of it. Is it an anomaly? Here we are the evening before a debate. And I was actually involved with the interview with Trump live, where he brought up, I asked, "You're going to prepare for this debate at all?" I'm going to fly over to Scotland. I'm going to go watch the golf tournament there at my golf course, no less, right? Which I was shocked. I didn't know he owned that. And I'm flying over my jet. I thought to myself, either this guy is just taking this so cavalierly, or this is something unlike anything we've seen before. Whether you like him or whether you hate him, all of a sudden, what he has done is he's made everybody else have to step up their game. Yeah. And I think that there are some significant players on the Republican side with some good qualifications who have got to rise to the occasion in this debate. Otherwise, they're going to this just becomes the Trump.
There's two things. First of all, I agree with you. I think there's some strong Republicans that could be a strong presidential candidate. I don't think anybody's going to be listening to him too much Thursday night. The one thing about Donald Trump, though, is that what I think people look at is that he doesn't care. And when you don't care, you can say what you think. Now, whether it's right or wrong, and I don't think Donald Trump's a Republican by any stretch of the imagination, other than he's a businessman, because most of his social views are on the opposite side of the aisle. But he is saying a lot what's on people's minds. Now, whether you're going to vote for that guy is a whole different issue. Yeah. But I think, like you said, it sounds really good. Yeah. He's throwing red meat out.
Yeah. And a lot of it, too, is just anger at politics and politicians overall. Yeah. The same old with nothing getting finished. Or nothing getting fixed. Yeah. Exactly. So that could be a big piece of what this is, too. Just that incredible general frustration of a broken Washington. And here's a guy who, at least, I think that the majority of folks who even would say that they like him would not say that this is the guy they want at 3 o'clock in the morning, getting the call up into the bedroom to run down to the...
you don't know where he's going to be at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Well, there could be that. Yeah, exactly. There's that part. But to run down to the Situation Room and handle a major issue in the Middle East,
you want his finger on the button.
Thank you. Well said. You saved me 2 paragraphs there. You want his finger on the button. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, our time's finishing up right now, and I want to thank you guys both for coming in. And because maybe by the next time we get together, the presidential race will be heating up a little bit, and we could talk about all the blunders that went along the way. But I want to thank you guys for coming in. This is the fastest hour that I ever have taping, and I thoroughly enjoy it. And I want to thank you guys for watching this episode of The Upside, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.